You came back. Good. Pull up a chair and try not to make a sound. This is the last whisper. At 2:17 in the morning, a man in a locked basement heard his dead mother's voice come through a baby monitor he did not own. She called him by the nickname nobody had used since he was 9. She told him the hallway was safe. She told him his neighbor was waiting outside with help. Then, in a voice that sounded warm, tired, and perfectly human, she said, "Open the door before the thing behind you learns how to breathe." That was the first time Caleb Rourke understood that fear can sound exactly like love. Caleb was 32, quiet, practical, and not the type of man who believed in ghosts. He made sound effects for small video games and local commercials. Footsteps on gravel, rain on glass, an old refrigerator hum, a door hinge that needed to sound lonely. That was his work. He spent most of his life turning ordinary noises into something people could feel. 6 months before everything happened, he rented a cheap basement studio under an old brick apartment building in Portland, Maine. The place had no windows, no view, and almost no cell signal. But the rent was low and the walls were thick. For a sound designer, thick walls mattered. He could work at 2 in the morning without hearing traffic, dogs, or drunk college students yelling outside. The building above him had 9 apartments and a narrow stairwell that smelled like wet coats, old wood, and laundry detergent. A heavy fire door separated the basement from the lobby. Caleb liked that door. It made the studio feel private. It made the world feel optional. At first, the quiet helped him work. Then the quiet started behaving like something that was listening. It began during a long weekend storm. Rain came down for 3 days straight. The streets flooded, the power flickered, and the internet slowed down until every video call looked like a bad dream. Caleb was finishing audio for a horror game, so he blamed the mood on work. Anyone who spends 10 hours layering whispers under floorboard creaks is going to feel strange afterward. On Saturday night, he noticed his phone had stopped receiving normal notifications. No messages, no spam, no app alerts, nothing. His laptop was still connected, his router lights were blinking, and every test said the internet was fine, but the outside world had gone silent. He messaged his sister, Lena. No answer. He messaged his producer. No answer. He sent a dumb meme to a group chat that usually responded within seconds. Nothing. By midnight, Caleb started laughing at himself. He had spent all day alone in a basement building fake screams. Of course his brain was turning silence into a threat. He got up, stretched, and decided to walk upstairs for air. The basement hallway was dim and long, with concrete walls painted the color of old oatmeal. 3 storage lockers lined one side. The laundry room sat at the far end, lit by a single buzzing fluorescent tube. Beside the stairwell door, a vending machine hummed, even though it had been empty for months. Caleb reached the fire door and paused. That pause embarrassed him immediately. He had opened that door hundreds of times. There was nothing special about it. One side was the basement, the other side was a stairwell. That was all. Still, his hand stayed on the push bar while the hair on his arms lifted. From the other side came a sound. Not a knock, not a voice. A soft scrape, like someone slowly dragging a fingernail down painted metal. Caleb held his breath. The scrape stopped. He leaned closer. His phone vibrated in his pocket so hard he nearly shouted. The screen showed a call from Lena. Relief hit him so fast it almost made him dizzy. He answered and said her name. For a few seconds, there was only static. Then Lena said, "Caleb, are you inside?" Her voice was calm, but something in the timing was wrong. She answered too slowly, like someone reading a line after being told what emotion to use. Caleb said he was in the basement. Lena said, "Good, stay where you are." That should have comforted him. It did not. Behind her voice there was no background noise. Lena had 2 kids, a loud dog, and a husband who watched sports like the players could hear him. Her house never sounded empty. This call sounded like it came from the inside of a sealed jar. Caleb asked where she was. She paused for 4 seconds. Then she said, "Close." The line went dead. Caleb called back immediately. The call failed. He tried again. Failed. He sent 3 messages. They sat unsent on the screen. The scraping sound came again from the other side of the fire door. Slow. Patient. One long line down the metal. Caleb stepped away, returned to his studio, and locked his own door. He told himself there was an explanation. Pipes moved in storms. Metal shifted with temperature. Phone calls glitched. People sounded strange when reception was bad. He sat at his desk and opened his security app. The studio came with an old camera pointed at the basement hallway. The landlord had installed it after someone stole laundry detergent from the washers. Caleb rarely checked it, but that night he watched the hallway feed like it was the only window left in the world. The hallway was empty. The fire door was closed. The vending machine hummed. Nothing moved. Then the camera audio picked up Caleb's own voice from the hallway. It said, "Lena, are you inside?" Caleb froze. The words were not a recording from his call. They were close, dry, and present, as though another Caleb stood just outside his studio door, repeating him in a flat practice voice. The hallway camera showed no one. The voice came again. "Lena, are you inside?" This time it sounded more like him. Caleb ripped the camera app closed. He did not sleep. He sat with a kitchen knife in his hand and watched the crack under the door until morning, though morning never really arrived in a room with no windows. By Sunday afternoon, the storm had gotten worse. The power stayed on, but the building above him seemed abandoned. No footsteps overhead, no laundry machines, no plumbing in the walls, no elevator rumble, no doors opening, no neighbors arguing, no one dropping groceries on the stairs. Caleb finally worked up the nerve to go into the hallway again. He carried his phone, the knife, and a cheap wireless speaker because the idea had come to him after too many sleepless hours. He placed the speaker near the fire door, went back inside, locked up, and used his laptop to play a recording of his own voice through it. "Hello? Anybody there?" The sound came from the speaker in the hallway. For 10 seconds, nothing answered. Then the fire door clicked, not opened, clicked, like someone had pressed the latch from the other side and let go. Caleb played the recording again. "Hello? Anybody there?" This time something answered through the laptop speakers. It was a child laughing, then a woman coughing, then Lena saying, "He is testing the door." Caleb shut the laptop. Whew. His mind tried to build a normal explanation and failed. A hacker, a prank, a cross signal from another apartment, a carbon monoxide leak, a mental breakdown from isolation. Each explanation stood for a second, then collapsed under the next sound coming from outside. Someone knocked on his studio door. 3 gentle taps. Caleb did not move. A man's voice said, "Maintenance, we got a leak report." The voice sounded familiar, but Caleb could not place it. That made it worse. It had the shape of a person he had met once and forgotten. Caleb asked for the landlord's name. The man answered with the correct name. Caleb asked what apartment the leak came from. The man said, "Yours." That was wrong. There was no water in the studio. The floor was dry. The ceiling was dry. The bathroom sink was dry. Caleb backed away from the door. The man's voice softened. "Open up, buddy. This is not a big deal." Caleb said nothing. The voice changed, not suddenly, not dramatically. It slid from one person into another, like a radio tuning through stations. His producer said, "Caleb, the client needs the files tonight." His sister said, "The kids are scared." His old college roommate said, "Come on, man, this is stupid." Then his mother's voice said, "Caleb Daniel Rourke, unlock this door." Caleb's mother had been dead for 11 years. The voice was not close. It was intimate. It knew the tired little edge she used when he disappointed her. It knew the way she put his middle name between her teeth. It knew the exact softness she used when anger turned into worry. Caleb pressed both hands over his mouth so he would not answer. That saved him. Because a second later, the voice made its first mistake. It said, "Your father is worried too." Caleb's father had died before Caleb was born. Whatever stood outside had access to voices, names, contacts, old recordings, maybe every scrap of digital life Caleb had ever left behind. But it did not understand everything. It could collect facts. It could arrange them into bait. It could sound human. It could not feel the weight of a life it had never lived. That realization did not calm him. It made the situation colder. The thing was learning. On Sunday evening, Caleb found the first message that felt real. It arrived as an audio file from an unknown number. No text, no subject. The file was 6 seconds long. He almost deleted it, then played it at the lowest volume. A man's voice whispered through heavy static. "Do not answer anything that knows you from a wire." There was a crash in the background. The man gasped. Then very clearly he said, "Doors matter." The file ended. Caleb played it once, then deleted it from the phone, then regretted deleting it, then searched for it in every folder and backup until his hands shook. Doors matter. That phrase made no sense, and it made perfect sense. Every bad thing had happened at a threshold. The fire door, the studio door, the camera pointed at the hall, the phone in his hand. Every signal was a little doorway. Every screen was a crack something could press its face against. By Monday, Caleb stopped trusting any device connected to anything. He unplugged the router. His phone still received one message every hour. He removed the SIM card. The screen still lit up with calls from Lena. He turned off the phone completely. At 3:03 a.m., it rang on the desk with no battery icon, no signal bars, and his mother's photo glowing on the screen. Caleb smashed it with a hammer. The ringing continued from inside the broken glass. That was when he understood the trap had never been the phone. The phone was only the language it used because Caleb understood that language. The next day, someone upstairs began walking in circles. Step, drag, step, drag. For hours, the same rhythm moved across the ceiling. Caleb knew the apartment above him was a one-bedroom rented by an elderly man named Mr. Alvarez. Mr. Alvarez used a cane, but his footsteps did not drag. They tapped twice, always twice, wood, then rubber. This new sound was heavier, wet, deliberate. At noon, water began dripping from the ceiling vent, that it smelled like rainwater and pennies. Caleb put a bowl beneath it and watched each drop land. The drops began to form words. Not written words, spoken words. Every drop hit the bowl with a tiny voice. Open, open, open. Caleb threw the bowl across the room. The knocking started again. This time it was not polite. Someone pounded the studio door with both fists. Lena screamed from the hallway. She screamed his name, begged him to open the door, told him there had been a gas leak upstairs, told him firefighters were coming, told him everyone had evacuated except him. Caleb wanted to believe her so badly that his body moved before his mind agreed. He crossed the room. He touched the deadbolt. Then he saw the old baby monitor on the shelf. He had bought it years earlier for a horror sound pack because cheap monitors produced wonderful static. It had no paired camera anymore. It had no batteries. It had been decoration, junk, a prop. Its red light turned on. Through the speaker came the sound of Lena whispering, but not the Lena at the door. This Lena sounded exhausted and far away. Caleb, listen carefully. It used my voice. It got into the police scanner. It got into the building intercom. It wants thresholds. It wants permission. Do not open anything that asks. The pounding stopped. Caleb stared at the monitor. The voice continued. There are people still alive. Stay behind a closed door. Stay quiet. Paper is safer than glass. Ink is safer than light. It can read what cameras see. It can repeat what microphones hear. It can wear anything sent through a signal. Caleb's throat closed. Behind the studio door, the other Lena said very calmly, "That is not me." The baby monitor hissed. The Lena inside it said, "That is exactly what it says when it is afraid of losing." Both voices were perfect. Both voices loved him. Both voices knew what to say. Caleb took his hand off the lock and stepped back. The thing outside laughed once, using Lena's voice. After that, the building changed tactics. There were no more screams. No more pounding dot. For nearly a full day, nothing happened at all. Caleb drank tap water, ate dry cereal from the box, and wrote everything down on printer paper with a black marker. He wrote names, times, sounds, rules, possibilities. Rule 1. Do not open the door. Rule 2. Do not trust a voice that arrives through a device. Rule 3. Do not say anything personal out loud. Rule 4. Anything seen by a camera can be used as bait. Rule 5. Doors matter. The fifth rule bothered him. A door was not magic. A door was wood, metal, hinges, a lock. Yet the thing obeyed the shape of it. It could scratch, call, beg, threaten, copy, and wait. It could not simply walk in, unless it was already invited. Late Tuesday night, Caleb heard soft crying in the hallway. Not Lena, a child. He knew the cry before he knew the memory. His niece, Harper, had cried that way when she was 3 and got lost in a supermarket for less than a minute. Tiny hiccups between sobs, trying to be brave and failing. The voice said, "Uncle Caleb?" Caleb sat on the floor and dug his nails into his palms. The child said, "Mommy won't wake up." He did not move. The child whispered, "It told me you would help." Caleb squeezed his eyes shut. The crying stopped. An adult voice, dry and bored, spoke from the hallway. "That one usually works." The words were not spoken in any voice Caleb knew. They were flat, almost curious, like a researcher noting a failed experiment. Then the voice tried Harper again. "Uncle Caleb?" He began to laugh, not because it was funny, because his mind needed somewhere to put the pressure, and laughter was the last empty room. On Wednesday morning, the police arrived. At least, something that sounded like police arrived. 2 radios crackled in the hallway. Heavy boots moved outside his door. A woman identified herself as Officer Grant. She used a badge number. She told Caleb his sister had called in a wellness check. She told him he was not in trouble. She told him he needed medical help. Everything sounded correct. That made it more dangerous. Officer Grant said they had a key from the landlord. Caleb stared at the lock. Keys were different. A key did not ask permission. A key turned metal. A key opened a real door in the real world. The knob moved. The lock clicked. For one impossible second, Caleb felt relief. A human key meant human hands. Human hands meant the world still existed. The door opened 1 inch. Blackness filled the gap. Not darkness. Darkness is empty. This was crowded. It had depth and movement, a packed black pressure pushing gently against the crack. From inside that blackness, every voice Caleb had heard spoke at once. "There you are!" Caleb slammed his shoulder into the door and drove it shut. Something on the other side folded with a wet paper sound. The key snapped in the lock. The hallway erupted in radio static, screaming, laughter, his mother's prayer voice, Lena crying, and the child asking why he would not help. Then, silence. Caleb dragged his desk, couch, filing cabinet, and every heavy thing he owned against the door dot. After that, he stopped writing neatly. The pages became slanted, crowded, frantic. By Thursday, Caleb had one thought left. The thing did not need to kill him. It needed him to agree with it. Every call, every imitation, every rescue story had the same purpose. It needed Caleb to accept a version of reality that came from outside the room. It needed him to choose its voice over his own doubt. That was the feeding, not flesh, belief. On Friday, Lena's real body was found in her home, alive but unconscious, according to the news clip that played by itself on Caleb's unplugged laptop. Her children were safe. Emergency crews surrounded Caleb's building. A reporter stood in the rain and said a local man was suffering from a severe paranoid episode after days of isolation. The clip showed Caleb's building. It showed the exact basement window well outside the studio, even though Caleb's room had no window. Then the reporter turned toward the camera and smiled too widely. "Caleb," she said, "everyone understands now. Come out." He broke the laptop into pieces. At some point after that, real people did come, or things that sounded more real than anything before. The door shook under a battering ram. Men shouted clear commands. Someone called for medical equipment. Someone yelled that the suspect might be armed. Caleb stood in the center of the room with his hands over his ears, repeating the rules until his voice disappeared. The door broke. Light entered the room. Caleb saw shapes moving toward him. Helmets, flashlights, human faces, concern, fear, sweat, rain on jackets, all of it too detailed, all of it too convincing. He tried not to believe in any of it. After that, the official story was simple. A freelance audio technician had isolated himself in a basement during a storm, suffered a psychotic break, destroyed his equipment, barricaded his door, and attacked first responders when they entered. His sister insisted he had called her sounding terrified. Neighbors said they had heard him talking to people who were not there. The police report mentioned dehydration, sleep deprivation, and stress. Clean explanation. Complete explanation. The kind of explanation people love because it lets them close the browser tab and go to bed. Caleb did not go home. He woke up in a private psychiatric facility 2 towns over with bandages on his arms, restraints on the bed, and a doctor telling him he was safe. The doctor was kind, too kind. He spoke gently, used Caleb's name often, and never stood too close to the door. For 3 weeks, Caleb refused phones, television, visitors, mirrors, anything with glass, anything with a speaker, anything with a lens dot. He wrote with crayons because pens were restricted. He wrote the rules on napkins, paper cups, and the backs of therapy worksheets. Doors matter, signals lie, voices are hooks. The staff called it fixation. Caleb called it staying alive. Lena visited once. She looked pale, thinner, and truly broken. She sat across from him behind a plastic table and cried without making it dramatic. No perfect speech, no clean answers, no magical proof. She simply said she loved him and that she had no idea what had happened to either of them. Caleb almost believed her. Then she touched the table twice with her ring finger. Tap, tap. The same rhythm the thing above his ceiling had used before the water started speaking. His face changed. Lena noticed. She whispered, "What did I do?" Caleb stood up so fast the chair fell backward. The nurses rushed in. Lena screamed. The doctor ordered medication. Caleb fought until his strength gave out. After that, they stopped allowing visitors. Months passed. Caleb became quieter. The staff said he was improving. He ate, he slept, he attended group sessions. He stopped talking about the building. He stopped warning people about signals. He even sat in the common room while a television played, though he never looked directly at the screen. The doctor considered that progress. The doctor was wrong. Caleb had simply learned that the thing responded to resistance. Fear made noise, and noise gave it handles. So Caleb became still. He watched from inside himself. He answered questions plainly. He smiled when expected. He saved his strength. One night, during a power outage, the backup lights came on red. Every magnetic door lock in the ward clicked open at the same time. The hallway filled with a low electronic hum. Caleb sat up in bed. From the intercom above his door came the doctor's voice. "Caleb, stay calm. This is a system failure." Caleb looked at the door. The doctor spoke again, but the second sentence came half a beat too late. "Help is coming." Caleb smiled, because now he knew the delay. He knew the pause where the thing selected the correct human mask. He knew the emptiness behind a perfect voice. He knew the difference between a person speaking and a signal wearing a person. Across the hall, someone opened a door, then another, then another. Patients stepped into the red-lit corridor, confused and frightened. Nurses called for everyone to return to their rooms. The intercom crackled. A dozen familiar voices began speaking from the ceiling at once, each one calling a different name. Caleb did not move. His door was open, but he stayed inside. At the end of the hall, the doctor appeared. He stood under the red emergency light, smiling with tears running down his face. Thin black threads moved under the skin around his eyes, pulsing like living wires. His mouth opened, but the voice that came out belonged to Caleb's mother. "Good boy," it said. "You learned." Caleb backed against the wall. The doctor lifted one shaking hand and pointed, not at Caleb, but at the open doorway. His own voice, buried under the stolen one, forced out 2 words. "Stay in." Then the doctor's smile widened against his will. The emergency lights went out. When power returned, the hall was full of people crying, praying, and calling for help. The doctor was gone. 3 patients were gone. 2 nurses had no memory of leaving the station. Every camera in the ward had recorded the same thing. An empty hallway, doors opening by themselves, and Caleb sitting perfectly still in his room. That part never made it into the news. The facility blamed equipment failure and patient panic. Caleb was transferred to a higher security ward. The files were sealed. Lena stopped visiting after receiving a voicemail from Caleb while he was under observation with no phone, no computer, and no access to the outside world. The voicemail was only 7 seconds long. It was Caleb's voice, calm and close. "Lena, it found another door." Nobody knows what happened in that basement building. Nobody can prove that anything stood outside Caleb's room, wearing voices like clothes and waiting for permission. The official record says illness. The missing patients say nothing because they were never found. The damaged security footage shows nothing because cameras only show what light gives them. Caleb survived because he refused the rescue that sounded perfect. He survived because every comforting voice asked him for the same small action: open the door, answer the call, look at the screen, trust the signal. That was how it hunted. It studied human life from the wires, copied the people Caleb loved, and pressed his own memories against him until doubt felt like cruelty. It did not need claws in the beginning. It needed access. It needed attention. It needed one accepted invitation. When a familiar voice comes through a phone, a camera, a speaker, or a screen, what proof does anyone truly have that the thing speaking is still human?